All right, chapter 10. You guys have made it this far. You are almost to the end of your requirements for winter break. If you're sticking around for the video, hopefully they've been helpful and they're helping you kind of keep your place and giving you confidence in your understanding of the novel so far. So we have chapter 9, and I think the action picks up a little bit more here. Chapter 8 was full of conversations, and there wasn't a lot of plot development, really, where chapter 10 kind of takes a turn and there's some action, there's a lot revealed, including some symbols that I think are pretty important. So the chapter starts off, and the main thing to notice about the characters here is Max seems very testy. He seems very closed off and irritable, I guess is the word. And we can assume that that's because of the exchange with Beatrice earlier. Maybe he didn't like the fact that she called him old and unfit, things like that, and it left a bad taste in his mouth. But regardless, they decide to go on a walk after they leave, and they're going around the grounds of Manderley, so we get to see a little more of Manderley. And the thing I notice about Manderley is there is a lot of contrast in Manderley itself. One passage you have dark, damp, wet, dreary, dark trees that stand as sentinels and guards of the place. And then we see a place like the Happy Valley, which is beautiful and quaint and quiet. Then you have the beach, which is loud and the waves are crashing everywhere. It's oppressive. You have the boathouse, which is damp with spider webs and everything. So there's two sides to Manderley. I don't know how prevalent this is to the events of the story, but I think in terms of the description of setting, I think that's what makes it so ambiguous. It makes it so dreamlike. You have the hauntedness of it on one side, but then you have the enchantedness and beauty of it on the other. You've got the West Wing and the East Wing, which are separated. It seems like there are two opposite sides to Manderley. You could maybe make that argument for some characters. I think De Winter is kind of like that. There are two sides to him. He's either really happy or really irritable. But regardless, I think Du Maurier does a really good job at capturing different sides of people and settings. And it's worth praising and appreciating. So as they're walking, we see a lot of the tensions that we're building within our narrator, a lot of the things that she's been thinking about. We see them start to bubble up to the surface. I think we expect that to happen, and it starts to happen. For example, she asks, "Do you like my hair?" Which, after the last conversation with Beatrice, she kind of criticized her hair. So we have a lot of the insecurities that are coming to the surface, and you'll see that the narrator feels like she has some confidence to ask those questions, but very quickly bottles them back up. Once De Winter starts talking, she'll bottle those things back up. You'll see that start to progress a lot throughout the novel, where she'll start to say something and then wish she didn't say it, or bottles that back up. So as they're walking, we get again this feeling of comfort. The narrator loves the Happy Valley. It's beautiful. There are flowers, and I think a symbol is starting to emerge. If you haven't picked up on it yet, we saw that when she was in Happy Valley, there were lots of rhododendrons, but the rhododendrons weren't red. They were white and they were pink. And after that, I saw the Happy Valley knew no trespassers. So what I'm kind of thinking is, I'm going through this line of reasoning in my head, and I'm thinking, okay, the red rhododendrons were really intimidating at the beginning. It was almost as if they were, haunting or looking over Manderley. But then we see in Happy Valley, we see rhododendrons that are not red. And there she says there are no trespassers. And anyone that could possibly be a trespasser right now is this idea of Rebecca trespassing into their relationship. So what I'm starting to see is the idea of the red flowers as Rebecca. I'm seeing that specific flower seems to really resonate with the character of Rebecca. She feels safe when she's not around the red flowers. The red flowers are the scary ones. They're also the ones that are inside of the house, that are placed from outside inside. In terms of the action, we saw them leave Happy Valley. They went down to the beach, and the dog ran off, and the narrator went to go chase the dog, and Max was like, don't worry about that. That dog's stupid. That dog's an idiot, which again, I think is a little bit revealing. The Max de Winter does not seem to really like the dog, which suggests to me that the dog was Rebecca's. And when I look back at previous chapters, we saw the dogs would go up and sniff the narrator and realize it wasn't the person they were looking for. So what I got from this chapter in terms of the dog was not really the property of Max. It was more the property of Rebecca, and Max doesn't really like the dog. So Max was like, oh, just let the dog go, whatever. He'll find his way back. If he dies, whatever, he dies. Didn't really care. But the narrator decides to chase the dog, and in turn opens up a new area of Manderley for us. We see the boathouse. So the narrator ran into the boathouse and grabbed some rope, and we got some gothic conventions in the boathouse: the spider webs, the damp, musty smell, the creaking of the door. It seems as if the boathouse is one of the dark places of Manderley. Definitely a contrast to the Happy Valley that we saw pages before. I like that contrast that she builds there. And we also met Ben, who was on the beach. It seems like something's not all right in Ben's head. He kind of seemed a little ghost-like. He's painted as a quote-unquote idiot. But at the same time, I was kind of creeped out by some of the things he was saying or not saying. He wouldn't answer the question of whether she has string. And then he said something that upon a second reading I thought was pretty important that you probably wouldn't pick up on a first reading, is he looked at the narrator and said, I never said nothing, did I? Which suggests that maybe he was told not to say something in the past. So he could be a key player in this story as we get to later chapters. So the narrator did come back with a dog and was relatively safe, but Max was really peeved that she went off and she went climbing on the rocks, and I don't think the narrator realized it when she was doing it. She was doing this out of instinct to save the dog, just being a basic human being. But we understand as readers, and if we don't, this was explained to us, that this made Max feel really uncomfortable because he lost his wife in that same bay. She drowned in that bay, and he didn't like the fact that she ran out on the rocks. He didn't want to see another one of his wives get swept away by the sea and drown. So that could explain why he was so upset that she did that. There was a very just awkward and uncomfortable conversation. The narrator felt really bad about what she did, and she tried to bottle up all of the emotions again, and Max was, getting really angry with her, and she just kind of bottled up. She's like, let's not talk about it. I'm so sorry, and then they were okay, and they moved on. And he smiled, and she's like, "That's all I needed." At the end of the chapter, we see again, we knew it was coming, that jealousy creep back in. The coat that Max told Robert to get for the narrator, it was obviously one of Rebecca's. And she was wearing Rebecca's coat, and she dropped a handkerchief, and when she pulled the handkerchief back out later, she saw the R. And the jealousy started to creep back in. The R is just very triggering for our narrator. We also see a pretty physical description of Rebecca start to form, and I love this, that we have a character who's dead, but every chapter we learn something about her. We get a lot of the descriptions of her personality in the last chapter. This chapter we see a description of her physical appearance start to build. That she's tall, she was slim, she's broader than the narrator. She pictured the narrator not bothering to button up the coat. The smell of it. It was almost a little bit sensualized, some very light sensualism going on. And if we know anything about Daphne du Maurier, you might start to be able to make some connections here. But we obviously see the jealousy starting to creep back in, and we see Rebecca being associated with the white azaleas. So we are seeing another flower kind of attached to Rebecca, and in this term it was the scent. So we are learning that when du Maurier's writing about flowers, there's obviously some symbolism there. We're starting to make some meaning with that symbolism. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your break, and congratulations for making it through Chapter 10. I hope that you are ready for the quiz, and I am certain that you will do great on it if you've been sticking around for these videos. See ya!